Good evening, everyone. Tonight we will be discussing midsegments. A midsegment of a triangle is a segment connecting the midpoints of the sides of the triangle. So here in the picture, M, N, and P are midpoints of side AB, AC, and BC respectively. So what respectively means is in the same order. So M is the midpoint of AB, N is the midpoint of AC, and P is the midpoint of BC. And so here I've shown in the picture the connections of the three midpoints, and so we have a midsegment triangle inside of our larger triangle. Midsegment theorem states that a segment connecting the two sides of a triangle is parallel to the third side and half the length of the third side. So in our picture, we know that DE is a midsegment. We know that because AD and BD are congruent as marked, and AE and EC are congruent as marked. So that means D and E are midpoints, so DE is a midsegment. And using midsegment theorem, we know that DE is parallel to BC, and so we have the parallel arrows right here, and that DE is 1/2 of the length of BC, so it's half the length of its larger counterpart. Well, if we think about what midpoint is, midpoint means cut in half. So that means that DE and BF and FC are all the same size, meaning that they are congruent. Let's look at an example. UV and WV are midsegments of triangle RST. Find UV and RS. Well, let's think about what we know from our midsegment theorem. If UV is a midsegment, then that means UV is parallel to RT, and we also know that UV is half the length of RT, so that means each of these three are all congruent to each other because we know the midpoint is the halfway point of the larger one. So those three segments, UV, RW, and WT, are all the same length. Also, VW is a midsegment, so that means that VW is parallel to RS, and that VW is congruent to RU and congruent to US, because again, U is the midpoint. So all three of those are congruent to each other. Now that we know what pieces are congruent to what, we can start figuring out UV and RS. Well, as we said before, UV is going to be half the size of RT. So UV is half of RT. Well, RT is 90. So that equals half of 90. So that means that UV is 45 inches. They also asked us to find the length of RS. Well, RS is the longer portion of VW, so that means it's going to be twice the size of VW. So RS equals 2 VW, which is 2 times 57. So the length of RS is 114 inches. And that is everything I have for this video. See you in class.